The champagne flute felt cold in my hand, a stark contrast to the overheated ballroom of the plaza. I just landed at JFK 2 hours ago, the red eye from San Francisco still clinging to my bones like a bad dream. The Acme Corp acquisition was a beast, all snarling lawyers and ego-driven founders, and I'd spent the last 72 hours wrestling it into something resembling a contract. My assistant, Chloe, had begged me to skip the party. You're dead on your feet. Megan, send regrets. David will understand. David, my husband, the CEO of the company celebrating its NASDAQ debut tonight. He'll understand. I had thought, too tired to examine the bitter little twist in my gut. David lived in a world of his own understanding these days. I'd changed in the car, swapping my travel slacks for a simple but lethal black Valentino sheath. My makeup was minimal, my dark hair swept up in a clip. I looked polished, in control. I always did. It was my armor. No one, especially not David, needed to see the cracks. The roar of the crowd hit me first as I pushed through the grand ballroom doors. Synapse Technologies' IPO had been the talk of the street, the darling of retail investors and hedge funds alike. The air smelled of expensive perfume, bourbon, and unadulterated greed. Screens flashed the ticker symbol .SYNP with a dizzying green arrow pointing skyward. $152 a share. A 40% pop from the offering price. I should have felt a thrill. This was my victory too, more than anyone in this room would ever know. My eyes scanned the crowd, finding him instantly, David, at the center of it all, where he always needed to be. He was laughing, his head thrown back, one hand casually tucked in the pocket of his Tom Ford tuxedo. The golden boy, the visionary. The press loved that narrative. The MIT dropout who built a billion-dollar data analytics empire from his dorm room. They never wrote about the trust fund I'd leveraged, the connections I'd called in, the nights I'd spent holed up in our tiny Cambridge apartment, refining the business model while he talked big ideas to anyone who'd listen, or the prenup I'd insisted on, the one that kept our finances and our marriage a carefully guarded secret. For the brand, he'd said, kissing my forehead, investors eat up the lone wolf genius thing. A wife complicates the story. I'd agreed. I was a strategist. I understood narrative. Now, watching him accept a backslap from a board member, the cold flute in my hand felt like a weapon. Megan, you made it. Victor Croft materialized at my elbow, his smile a slash of white in his tanned face, old money and sharp teeth. He'd been one of our first major investors, drawn more to my spreadsheets than David's demos. Victor couldn't miss the main event. His shrewd eyes assessed me, missing nothing. The Acme deal? Closed. At our terms. He gave a low, appreciative whistle. You're a miracle worker. He's lucky to have you. His gaze flicked to David. And the unspoken, even if he's too much of a fool to realize a thing between us. Victor knew the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Where's the lucky man? I asked, my voice perfectly neutral, holding court. As usual, they're about to start some dreadful corporate team-building game. Truth or dare for the venture capital set. He made a dismissive sound. I'm heading to the cigar bar. More honest company. Join me later? Maybe. As he melted away, I moved through the crowd, a ghost in my own life. I received nods, smiles, a few congratulations. Megan, from people who knew my official title, Chief Strategy Officer, but not my real stake. I smiled back, a practiced, professional curve of the lips. I found a spot near the back, half hidden by a potted fern, just as the event coordinator, a perky woman with a headset, took the mic. All right, Synapse family, to break the ice, we're going to play a little game. CEO versus CFO. A cheer went up. David was pulled onto the makeshift dance floor, flashing his camera-ready grin. Beside him was Ben, the portly, Nervous CFO. The game was indeed a juvenile truth or dare. Ben chose truth and was forced to confess his most embarrassing karaoke song. The crowd ate it up. Then it was David's turn. David Porter, the coordinator, trilled. Truth or dare? He made a show of considering, rubbing his chin. The room leaned in. He was a natural at this dot, commanding attention, milking the moment, live dangerously. He declared, winking at a group of young analysts who giggled. Dare. The coordinator consulted a stack of cards from the board members. A mischievous glint in her eye. She pulled one. Read it. And her eyebrows shot up. A theatrical pause. Oh, this is a good one. From the board. David, your dare is to give a passionate, movie-style kiss to the love of your life. The room erupted. Hoots, whistles, applause. My breath hitched. A tiny, almost imperceptible gasp lost in the noise. The love of your life. For a frozen second, our gazes locked across the crowded room. His eyes, a bright, clear blue, found mine in the shadows. I saw the flicker in them, surprise. Then a flicker of something that looked like panic, quickly smothered. He hadn't known I was here. A strange calm settled over me. This would be the moment. The ridiculous, public moment where he'd have to acknowledge me. He'd walk over, take my hand, maybe make a joke about the board, trying to get him in trouble with his mysterious girlfriend. It would be awkward. It would blow our carefully constructed cover, but it would be real. But David's smile didn't falter. It widened. He threw his hands up in a what can you do gesture. The charming, bashful CEO. Well, when the board commands. He didn't look at me again. Instead, he turned. His gaze swept the front row of clapping, eager faces, and it landed on her. Isabella Rossi, his executive assistant, 25, impossibly chic in a silver dress that looked painted on, her glossy dark hair falling over one shoulder. She'd been hovering at the periphery of his orbit all night. I realized now, fetching drinks, laughing a little too brightly at his jokes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not confusion, but a titillated anticipation. There had been whispers. I dismissed them. Isabella was efficient, ambitious, a climber. David appreciated efficiency, or so I'd told myself. David strode toward her, his stride confident. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with feigned shock. But I saw it the quick. Knowing glance, she shot a friend. The subtle shift in her posture from surprised to receptive. Oh, Isabella, you don't mind saving your boss from embarrassment, do you? David said, his voice amplified by the mic somewhere. Smooth as honey. A corporate jest. A performance. She giggled, playing her part. For the team. David. He didn't hesitate. He cupped her face with both hands. A gesture that felt too intimate, too practiced for a joke. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't a stage kiss. It was deep, hungry, possessive. One of his hands slid from her cheek into her hair. Her arms went around his neck, pulling him closer. The kiss went on and on. 5 seconds. 10. The whistles turned to roars of approval. Someone shouted, "Get a room." Inside me, something shattered, not with a bang, but with a sound like ice cracking across a vast, frozen lake. A cold, clear, splitting sensation that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips, my toes, the roots of my hair. I didn't move. I just watched. My face, I knew, was a mask of serene observation. My heart, however, had stopped beating and was now a dead, cold stone in my chest. The love of your life. The hypocrisy was so vast it was almost funny. The secret wife of 2 years. The architect of his success, standing in the dark. And the love of his life was the girl who fetched his coffee and sent his calendar invites. The kiss finally broke. They were both breathless, flushed. David grinned at the crowd, a conquering hero. Isabella looked dazed, triumphant. Her eyes scanned the room, and for one horrifying, searing second, they met mine. She didn't look away. A slow, subtle smile touched her lips. Not a smile of apology or embarrassment. It was a smile of recognition and victory. She knew. She had to know. The way she looked at me, it wasn't the look of a woman who'd just been unexpectedly kissed by her married boss. It was the look of a woman who'd just claimed territory. The roar of the crowd faded into a dull, static hum in my ears. My fingers tightened around the stem of my champagne flute. I looked down. In my other hand, forgotten until now, was the manila folder. Inside was the signed, exclusive letter of intent from Greystone Capital to lead Synapses next. Even larger. Series D round. $50 million. A deal I'd spent 3 months nurturing, schmoozing, and strategically leaking information to secure. A deal that would catapult Synapse into the big leagues and make David, personal net worth jump by 8 figures. My fingers moved before my mind could fully form the thought. There was no rage, no dramatic heaving. It was a surgical motion. I slid the LOI from the folder. The crisp, expensive parchment. I placed my champagne flute carefully on a passing waiter's tray. Then, with a calm, deliberate precision, I took the document in both hands and tore it. The rip was shockingly loud to my own ears. A clean, brutal sound. I tore it again, perpendicular to the first tear. Then again. I didn't stop until the letter of intent was a pile of confetti in my perfectly manicured hands. I let the pieces fall. They fluttered to the polished floor, like dead. Gray snow around my black stilettos. It was then that the large screen at the front of the ballroom, which had been cycling through generic celebratory graphics, and the skyrocketing SYNP ticker, flickered. The event photographer, trying to capture crowd reactions, had panned his camera across the ecstatic faces. It swept past the board members, past David and a still giggling Isabella, past groups of cheering employees, and landed on me. There I was, in stark, high-definition glory on the 20-foot screen. Megan Lane, CSO, the woman behind the curtain, standing alone, an island of stillness in the sea of revelry. My expression wasn't one of heartbreak. It was worse. It was utter, glacial dismissal, a look of final, unequivocal judgment. My eyes, dark and flat, were fixed on the back of David's head. The confetti of the most important deal of his company's future littered the floor at my feet. A hush fell, starting near the screen and rolling backward through the crowd like a wave. Heads turned from the screen to the real me, then back again. The joyful noise died, replaced by a confused, buzzing murmur. David, sensing the shift in the room's energy, turned from Isabella, his arms still slung around her shoulders, his smile still in place. He followed the crowd's gaze to the screen. I saw the exact moment he saw me, saw the image, saw the shredded paper. His smile didn't just fade, it disintegrated. The color drained from his face so completely, so rapidly. It was as if someone had pulled a plug. His tan skin turned a sickly, grayish white. His blue eyes, bright with triumph a second ago, went wide and hollow with sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked like a man who had just seen his own ghost. His arm dropped from Isabella as if her shoulder had burned him. He took an involuntary step toward the screen, toward me, his mouth opening, but no sound came out. The charming CEO was gone. In his place was a boy caught in a lie so catastrophic he couldn't even begin to formulate an excuse. The moment hung, suspended, for a lifetime. Then, I moved. I turned on my heel. The crowd, now dead silent, parted for me as easily as it had for him minutes before. But this was a different kind of parting. This wasn't adoration. It was shock, morbid curiosity, and the instinctive human reaction to make way for an oncoming storm. I walked, not hurriedly, not with the frantic energy of a fleeing victim. I walked with the measured, purposeful stride of a queen leaving a province, she had just condemned to ashes. My heels clicked a steady, cold rhythm on the marble floor, the only sound in the hushed room. I didn't look back, not at David, standing frozen and pale on the dance floor, not at Isabella, whose triumphant smile had curdled into confusion, not at the shredded pieces of his future, scattered on the floor. I pushed through the heavy ballroom doors, and the silence was replaced by the muted, civilized sounds of the hotel lobby. The world outside was still normal. People laughed, talked, lived. I walked straight through the gilded lobby, out the Fifth Avenue entrance, and into the cool New York night. A black town car was idling at the curb. As ordered, my driver, Leo, took one look at my face and jumped out to open the door. "Home, Ms. Lane?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. I slid into the leather seat. "No, Leo, not home." I took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached my lungs all night. The cold, clear air of vengeance filled me. "Take me to the Tribeca office." And Leo, "Yes, ma'am, I'm going to need you to be on call for the next 24 hours. Of course." As the car pulled away from the glittering facade of the plaza, I finally let the mask slip, not into tears, into nothing. My face in the darkened window was a stranger's, pale, determined, eyes like chips of obsidian. I felt no sadness yet. That would come later, in waves, and I would let it crash against the seawall of my rage. What I felt now was a crystalline, focused clarity, the love of your life. The words echoed in the silent car. A sick joke, a public humiliation, a line drawn in the sand of shredded paper. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Once, twice, 10 times in rapid succession. I didn't need to look to know it was him. The buzzing was a frantic, desperate pulse against my leg. I finally pulled it out. The screen was a constellation of notifications. David, 12. I swiped to ignore the calls. A text banner popped up. David, Megan, stop. Where are you? It was a joke. The dare. IT was a stupid joke. A joke. Of course. The destruction of my dignity. The flaunting of his infidelity. The annihilation of our private life. That all a hilarious prank for the benefit of the board. My fingers flew over the screen. Cold and steady. Me. The joke's over. David. So are we. I hit send. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled past his name, and found the one labeled A. Costas, attorney. I pressed call. It was answered on the second ring. "Megan? It's late. Everything all right?" Andreas Costas sounded alert, wary. He was my lawyer, the one who drafted the prenup David had scoffed at but signed. He knew the truth. "Andreas," I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "No, nothing is all right. I need you to meet me at the Tribeca office and bring the file, the one labeled Project Phoenix." There was a beat of silence on the other end. He knew what that meant. We drafted it as a contingency. A year ago, when the whispers about Isabella had started and David had begun coming home with excuses that smelled like another woman's perfume. A nuclear option. "Megan," he said, his voice low and serious. "Are you sure? Once we start this." I looked out at the blur of New York lights, thinking of David's bloodless face on that screen, the way he'd kissed her, the confetti at my feet. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said quietly. "He just chose his dare. Now it's my turn to choose truth." I ended the call. The phone buzzed again. "David." I held my thumb over the screen, hovering over his name. Then, with a tap that felt more final than any kiss, I blocked his number. The town car glided to a stop in front of the sleek, dark building that housed my private office, my sanctuary, my war room. I got out, my head held high. The night air was cold, bracing. It smelled of rain and city and possibility. The game was over. The war had just begun. The silence in my Tribeca penthouse was absolute and accusing. I didn't turn on the main lights. the ambient glow from the city below, bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, was enough. It cast long, skeletal shadows across the minimalist furniture David had insisted on that all cold steel and uncomfortable white leather. A showpiece, not a home. His showpiece. My heels echoed on the polished concrete as I walked straight to the wall safe hidden behind a Warhol print. My fingers, steady and cold, dialed the combination. Not our anniversary, not his birthday. The date Synapse received its first seed round. Mi Victory. Inside were files, thick, legal, meticulously organized. The prenuptial agreement, the trust documents for the Porter Lane Family Trust, which held my initial $2 million investment, the private shareholder agreements that gave me 18% of Synapse to more than any individual, including David, all signed under layers of NDAs and shell companies, all predicated on our secret. I pulled them out, the weight of them satisfying in my hands. Then I moved to his study. The room smelled like him, sandalwood cologne and arrogance. I went to his mahogany desk, a monstrosity he'd bought at auction to feel important. I didn't rifle through drawers. I went straight for the bottom left one. It was locked. A faint, grim smile touched my lips. He thought he was so clever. I knelt, felt along the underside of the desk drawer until my fingers found the small, magnetic key box. Predictable. Inside was a single silver key. The drawer slid open with a soft whisper. Inside, beneath a stack of quarterly reports, was what I was looking for, a sleek, black burner phone. I powered it on. The screen lit up, requiring a passcode. I didn't hesitate. I typed in the code to his corporate email, the one he'd used since MIT. The one he thought I didn't know he still used for his dirt. Ego makes men lazy. The home screen blossomed. I opened the text messages. There was only one thread. The contact was saved as IZ. The last message, sent 3 hours before the gala, made my blood freeze into something harder than ice. Is, tonight, after the party, your place or mine? David, mine. She's in SF. I'll get rid of the staff. I scrolled up. Flirtation. Pet names. Princess. King. Discussions of her promotion to Director of Special Projects, that a title I'd vetoed in the last exec meeting. References to dinners. Hotel stays. A weekend in the Hamptons I'd believed was a board retreat. Then, the financial one. A photo of a bank transfer confirmation. $50,000 from a Synapse subsidiary to a boutique interior design firm. The memo line. Retainer, Rossi Residence, as he was decorating her apartment with company money. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The hurt was a distant, secondary thing, a faint ache behind the fortress walls of my rage. The primary sensation was vindication. I'd known. Some deep, wounded part of me had known for months. Now, I had proof. I pulled out my own phone and took clear, studying pictures of every incriminating text. I emailed them to myself and to Andreas's secure server. Then I placed the burner phone back, exactly as I found it. The front door's electronic lock beeped. My head snapped up. He was home early. The party must have imploded after my exit. I didn't move from behind his desk. David stumbled into the study doorway, still in his tuxedo jacket, but his tie was loose. His hair disheveled. He smelled of bourbon and panic. His eyes, bloodshot, found me in the dim light. Megan, Jesus Christ. His voice was a ragged scrape. What the hell was that? You just left. You embarrassed him. I leaned back in his desk chair, steepling my fingers. Did I? I thought the passionate, movie-style kiss with your assistant covered the embarrassment portion of the evening quite thoroughly. He flinched. It was a dare, a stupid game. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Am I? I asked, my voice quiet. Tell me, David, when the board said the love of your life, who did you think of? Me. Your wife of 2 years? Or the 25-year-old you've been fucking and paying off with company funds? All the color drained from his face again. The same look from the ballroom. Guilty terror. That's insane. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $50,000 retainer from the Cyprus subsidiary to Rossi Residence. I'm talking about the director promotion you pushed through. I'm talking about the text you sent her 3 hours ago, planning your little sleepover while you thought I was on the other side of the country. His mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock. You went through my things? You left your plaything in a locked drawer with the key taped underneath. David, you didn't exactly make it hard. I stood up slowly. Did you think I was stupid? Or just so blindly in love I wouldn't notice? He rallied then, the indignation rising to cover his fear. Notice what? That I have a life? That this company is a pressure cooker, and maybe I need someone who supports him, who doesn't look at me like I'm another one of her spreadsheet calculations. The words were meant to wound. They landed, but they only fueled the cold fire inside me. Supports you? I took a step toward him. Who secured the Greystone LOI? David? The one I tore up tonight. Who structured the Series B when you were ready to give away 40% of the company to the first VC who smiled at you? Who wrote the algorithm that's the actual heart of Synapses, proprietary tech in our first pitch deck? Was that Isabella? Did she support you with that? Too? He was trembling now, with rage or shame. I couldn't tell. You always do this. You always have to hold everything over me. I did this. I did that. Without me, there is no company. My vision. My charisma. You're just the mechanic. The back office help. The back office help who owns 18% of your vision. I said icily. The back office help whose signature is on the prenup that gives me 70% of our assets, which, let's be honest, are mostly my assets, in the event of infidelity, which, thanks to your little performance tonight and the digital trail on your burner phone, is now a proven fact. The financial reality hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his bravado crumbling. Megan, baby. No, please. It was a mistake. A stupid, midlife crisis mistake. She means nothing. You Remy wife. You're the one I love. He reached for me. I took a sharp step back, my heel connecting with the desk. Don't you dare touch me. What do you want? He pleaded, his voice breaking. I'll fire her. Tomorrow. I'll cut her off. I'll give you a seat on the board. Publicly. We'll announce our marriage. Whatever you want. What I want, I said, gathering the files from his desk, is for you to sleep in the bed you made, with the love of your life. I walked past him toward the bedroom. Where are you going? He demanded. Following me. I didn't answer. I went to the large walk-in closet, pulled down a vintage leather weekender bag that a gift from my father when I got my first job on Wall Street. I began packing, not the couture dresses or the jewels. Simple blouses, trousers, my running shoes, my personal laptop, the files. You can't leave, he yelled from the doorway. We need to talk about this. The company, the investors. Greystone, what the hell did you do with the LOI? I rendered it moot. I said, not looking at him as I folded a sweater. Consider it my resignation from the role of back office help. You bitch. The word exploded from him. Raw and ugly. You spiteful. Cold bitch. You destroy everything we built because of one little slip? I finally turned to face him, the bag in my hand. You didn't slip. David, you took a running leap. And yes, I will destroy every last brick of it before I let you and your princess profit from my work and my humiliation. The sheer certainty in my voice seemed to finally terrify him into silence. He just stared, his chest heaving. I walked to the apartment's front door. I paused, my hand on the knob. My lawyer will be in touch. Until then, I suggest you talk to your lawyer and maybe start looking for a new apartment. I'll be putting this one on the market. The mortgage. After all, comes from a joint account, my joint account. I opened the door and walked out into the private hallway, leaving him standing alone in the dark, expensive tomb of our marriage. Downstairs, Leo was waiting with the town car. As instructed, the office. Ms. Lane, the office. Leo, as we drove, I pulled out my phone. I opened the encrypted app Andreas had set up. I typed a single message. Me. Phase 1 is go. The Phoenix is awake. His reply was instantaneous. Andreas. Understood. ETA 20 minutes. Have the coffee strong. I leaned my head against the window, watching the city blur by. The numbness was wearing off, and the first sharp sting of betrayal pierced through. A hot tear escaped, tracing a path down my cheek. I let it fall. Just one. Then I wiped it away, the salt feeling like a brand. The game had changed. David wanted to play the daring CEO, the king of his domain. Fine. It was time to show him what a queen could do when she was checkmated. She could flip the board. The dawn light creeping into my Tribeca office was a pale, indifferent gray. I'd been at my desk for hours. The coffee Andreas had brought now a cold sludge in the bottom of the cup. Spread before me were not personal effects, but weapons, financial statements, shareholder registries, clauses of our marriage contract, highlighted in violent yellow. Andreas Costas, looking impeccably sharp despite the hour, finished reviewing the last document. He let out a low whistle. The burner phone texts are the nail. The financial misallocation is the coffin. With the prenup's infidelity clause and your controlling stake held in the blind trust. Megan, you hold all the cards. I don't want to just win the hand. Andreas, I said, my voice rough from coffee and silence. I want to burn the table down. I slid a resignation letter across the desk, brief, citing irreconcilable differences in strategic vision. Effective immediately. Send it to the board, HR, and a press release to the usual outlets. The key person clause in my shareholder agreement triggers. My voting rights go to the independent trustee for now. David can't touch them. Andreas nodded, making a note. It will cause panic. The stock is still volatile post-IPO. Good, I said flatly. I then picked up my personal phone, the one with only a handful of numbers. I scrolled to V. Croft and hit call. Victor answered on the second ring, his voice a gravelly rasp. Megan, I wondered when I'd hear from you. The plaza exit was theatrical. It was a prologue. Victor, are you interested in the main act? I could almost hear him lean forward. I'm always interested in a good show, especially a profitable one. Synapse is a house of cards built on my algorithms and David's lies. The CFO is a yes man. The tech roadmap for the next 2 years is in my head, not theirs. The Acme acquisition, it's a dud. The due diligence I just completed shows their core IP is litigation bait. I have the report. There was a long silence. Then, a slow, appreciative chuckle. You're talking about a short, a massive, coordinated short. I'm talking about you and your fund taking a leading short position. I'll provide the ammunition, the flawed Acme data, evidence of David's financial improprieties with the Rossi payments, testimonials from 3 key engineers who are about to resign, citing David's mismanagement. I'll leak it to the journal. You'll make a fortune on the drop. And what do you get, my dear? Victor asked, his tone turning shrewd. Besides the satisfaction, I get to see him ruined, and I get a seat at your table. 10% of your fund's profits on this play, invested directly into my new venture. No management fee. He laughed, a genuine sound of delight. Cold-blooded. I admire it. Send the documents to my secure server. You have a deal. I hung up and looked at Andreas. Start the divorce filing. Full asset freeze. Use the infidelity and financial dissipation claims. I want his personal and corporate accounts locked down by close of business today. My phone buzzed on the desk. This time, it was my assistant, Chloe. Megan. He's here, in the lobby. He's demanding to see you. The security team is holding him, but he's making a scene. I took a deep breath. Let him up. 5 minutes later, the door to my office suite flew open. David looked like hell. He was still in last night's rumpled tuxedo shirt. His eyes wild. What the hell is this? Megan? He shouted, waving his phone. A resignation? A press release? An asset freeze? Are you insane? Sit down. David, I said, my voice calm. I will not sit down. You're trying to destroy me. Over what? A stupid kiss? Andrea stood, a silent, imposing presence. Mr. Porter, I'd advise you to lower your voice. This is my client's place of business. David ignored him, stomping toward my desk. You can't do this. The company needs me. The board will never accept this. The board, I said, leaning back, has already received a detailed summary of your misuse of corporate funds for personal gifts to a subordinate, along with a selection of your text messages. They're having an emergency conference call as we speak. The bluster drained from him. He sagged, gripping the edge of my desk. You bitch. You set me up. I didn't make you cheat. David, I didn't make you steal. I just made sure there were consequences. I stood up, facing him. You're right about one thing. The company needs leadership. It just doesn't need yours anymore. You think you can just take it all? He hissed, his face contorted. Everything I built? We built. I corrected him softly. And yes, I'm taking my half. And because of your spectacularly poor judgment, I'm taking a great deal more. The apartment, the Hamptons house, my shares. And by the time Victor Croft is done, your remaining shares won't be worth the paper they're printed on. The name Victor Croft hit him like a physical blow. He paled. Croft? You're working with that shark? Megan. He'll gut the company. He'll gut me. I'm counting on it. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw not anger, but a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He saw the strategist, the planner, the woman who had always been 2 steps ahead. He was just finally noticing the chessboard. Please, he whispered, the fight gone. Tears welled in his eyes, self-pitying, pathetic tears. Please, Megan, don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake. One mistake. Isn't our marriage worth more than this? The word love was the final straw. It shattered the last remaining shard of softness inside me. I walked around the desk until I was inches from him. He smelled of stale booze and desperation. Our marriage, I said, my voice, so low only he could hear, was a business partnership, one where you were the charismatic frontman, and I was the engine. You got greedy. You thought you could have the engine and a shiny new accessory, and I wouldn't notice the drain on power. You were wrong. I turned my back on him. Andreas, please see Mr. Porter out, and call building security. He is not to be allowed back in. Megan, he cried out as Andreas took his arm. I didn't turn around. I walked to the window, looking out at the waking city. I listened to the sounds of his struggling protests. Then the soft click of the door closing. My phone chimed. A notification. I looked down. SYNP was plummeting in pre-market trading, down 18%. The headlines were starting to flash. Synapse, CSO resigns unexpectedly. Reports of internal strife. Acme deal under scrutiny. Victor was moving fast. I picked up the phone. I had one more call to make. I dialed the number for Ben, the nervous CFO. He answered on the first ring. His voice strained. Megan? My God, what is happening? The board is in an uproar. David is screaming. The stock is. Ben. I interrupted, my tone cool and professional. Listen carefully. I'm giving you a chance. Resign. Today. Cite personal reasons. Do it before the Wall Street Journal story drops at noon. If you're still in that seat when it does, you'll go down with him. Your choice. I hung up before he could stammer a reply. The sun was fully over the skyline now, painting the steel and glass in bright, unforgiving light. my city, my rules. Phase 1 was complete. The strike had been launched. Now, I just had to watch the fallout and prepare for Phase 2. The green room of the CNBC studio smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I sat perfectly still in a stiff leather chair, my hands folded in my lap. On the monitor before me, the pre-interview segment played, a talking head blathering about Synapse's stock freefall, a graphic of a crashing plane next to the SYNP ticker flashed dramatically. "We're back in 60, Ms. Lane," a young production assistant said, poking her head in. "Lydia's ready for you." Lydia Vance, host of Squawk Hour, known for her velvet gloves and steel trap questions. I nodded, smoothing the non-existent wrinkle from my cream-colored blazer. It was armor, just like the simple strand of pearls at my throat. The look was curated, not the vengeful wife, but the wounded, dignified professional. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I knew who it was. "Unknown. Megan. It's David. Please, we need to talk. You're destroying everything." "I'm outside. I'm not leaving." I deleted it. I'd changed my number. He'd found the new one. Predictable. Andreas, sitting in a corner with his tablet, glanced up. He's getting desperate. The journal piece lands at noon. "It's over. It's just beginning." I murmured. 30 minutes later, I was perched on the bright set, the glow of the screens washing over me. Lydia Vance offered a practiced, sympathetic smile. "Megan Lane, thank you for joining us on what must be an incredibly difficult day. You've just resigned as CSO of Synapse Technologies, a company you helped build from the ground up. The market is reeling. Can you tell us why?" I looked directly into the camera lens, imagining David watching from his crumbling empire. "Thank you for having me, Lydia. My departure from Synapse is a profound personal decision. Over the past few years, the company's direction and leadership culture have diverged sharply from the values upon which it was founded. I can no longer, in good conscience, be a part of it." Lydia leaned in. "Leadership culture. That's a pointed phrase. There are rumors of serious internal issues, even misconduct at the highest levels. Are you able to comment?" I allowed a flicker of pain to cross my face. "Just for a second. What I can say is this. Synapse was built on a dream of innovation and integrity. My work, my passion, was for that dream. When personal conduct and professional governance betray that dream, the most ethical thing a leader can do is step away." I paused, letting the silence hang. "Even when it's heartbreaking to leave the team you love." "You say personal conduct." Lydia's voice softened, a trap being gently sprung. "The incident at the IPO gala has been widely discussed on social media. Your reaction was captured on screen. Many are speculating about your relationship with CEO David Porter. Can you clarify the nature of your connection?" This was the moment. I took a quiet breath. "David Porter and I began, then let my voice catch, just slightly. I looked down at my hands, then back up, my gaze clear and steady. David and I were married in a private ceremony 2 years ago." The studio, already quiet, went utterly still. Lydia's eyes widened with genuine, unfeigned shock. This wasn't in her notes. "Married," she repeated. "It was a decision we made to protect the company narrative." I continued, my tone even, devoid of bitterness. "The lone genius founder is a compelling story. I was content to be the silent partner, in business and in life. But the events of the gala, they were a very public confirmation of private betrayals. My marriage is over, so the kiss with his assistant, Isabella Rossi, was not an isolated dare." I said, my voice firming. "It was a symptom of a profound breach of trust and professional ethics, a breach I could no longer ignore. For the sake of the company's employees and investors who believe in the dream we once shared." The interview continued, but the bombshell had been dropped. I spoke of my early contributions, the algorithm, the seed funding from my family's Trust, framing it not as a boast, but as a sad footnote to a broken partnership. I was calm, eloquent, and devastating. I didn't accuse, I stated facts. I didn't look vengeful. I looked regretfully resolute. By the time I walked out of the studio, my phone was exploding. The headline was already trending. Hashtag SYMP, hashtag CO married. Secret wife reveals betrayal. Quits. Andreas fell into step beside me. That was a masterclass. The sympathy swing is immediate. David's PR team is having a collective stroke. The board is demanding his head. Good, I said, my steps sharp on the concrete. Let's go. My new Soho loft was a stark contrast to the Tribeca penthouse, all raw wood, industrial windows, and space. It felt clean, mine. I'd just poured a glass of Pinot Noir, needing to steady the adrenaline coursing through me. When the intercom buzzed, harsh and insistent, I walked to the panel. Yes, Megan, it's me. Please, let me up. We need to talk. Face to face. David's voice was ragged, slurred slightly. He'd been drinking. I pressed the button to unlock the downstairs door without a word. This needed to happen. 2 minutes later, he was pounding on my door. I opened it. He looked worse than he had in my office. His shirt was untucked, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. He pushed past me into the loft. What the hell was that? He screamed, spraying spittle. A national television interview? Secret wife? You've ruined me. The board is talking about suspending me. The stock is in free fall. You did that, David, I said, closing the door and leaning against it, glass in hand. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the mess. He paced like a caged animal. You have to fix this. You have to go back on. Recant. Say you were emotional. Say we're in counseling. Something. No. The flat finality of the word stopped him. He stared at me, his chest heaving. Then, the anger seemed to deflate all at once, replaced by a pathetic, wheedling panic. He stumbled toward me, falling to his knees on the polished concrete floor. He clutched at the hem of my trousers. Please, Megan, I'm begging you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. Isabella meant nothing. Nothing. You're my wife. You're everything. I'll do anything. I'll fire her today. I'll give you co-CEO. I'll sign over my shares. Just please, stop this. Don't destroy me. I looked down at him. This man I had once loved, now groveling at my feet. I felt nothing. A hollow, quiet void. Get up, David. You're embarrassing yourself. I love you. He sobbed, tears streaming down his face. I've always loved you. I was stupid. I was weak. Please. I took a slow sip of my wine. The rich, dark flavor was a stark contrast to the scene before me. You know what I always admired about you, David? I asked, my voice conversational. Your ambition, your sheer, relentless drive to be at the top, to be seen, admired, loved. He looked up, a flicker of hope in his wet eyes. I tilted my head. What I realize now is, I mistook ambition for strength, and I mistook need for love. I set my glass down on a side table with a soft click. You don't love me. You love what I built for you. And now that it's crumbling, you finally learned how to kneel. A little late, the hope died. His face crumpled into ugly despair. You're a cold-hearted bitch. You were always a machine. A calculating, ice cold. The doorbell chimed. A clean, melodic sound. David froze, his tirade cut short. Who the hell is that? I walked past him, ignoring his question, and pressed the intercom. Yes? A smooth, confident voice came through. Megan, it's Elias. We're on for 8, but I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd come up. My lips curved into the first real smile of the day. Perfect timing. Come on up. I released the door and turned back to David, who had clumsily gotten to his feet, wiping his face. Who's Elias? He demanded, a new, jealous suspicion dawning. A friend, I said simply. A moment later, a knock. I opened the door. Elias Black stood in the hallway. He was in his late 40s, with silver streaks at his temples and the calm, commanding presence of a man who had built empires and broken them. He was dressed in a casual but exquisitely cut charcoal sweater and slacks. In his hands was a bottle of Chateau Margaux that likely cost more than David's first car. His gaze swept past me, taking in the scene. David, disheveled and furious, standing in the middle of my loft. Elias's expression didn't change. A slight, polite smile touched his lips. "I see you have company," he said, his voice a low rumble. "My apologies for the intrusion. Megan." He extended the bottle. "A housewarming gift. I'll leave you to it." David found his voice, puffing out his chest. "Who are you?" Elias finally looked at him, and the sheer, unimpressed weight of his appraisal made David seem smaller, like a boy playing dress-up. "Elias Black," he said, as if stating the weather. He turned his attention back to me, dismissing David entirely. "Dinner at 8 still work?" "I've booked Carbone." "It does," I said, taking the bottle. "Thank you, Elias. I'll see you then." Elias gave a slight nod, his eyes holding mine for a second too long, that a look of shared understanding, of alliance. Then he turned and walked back toward the elevator, his footsteps silent on the hallway runner. I closed the door. The silence he left behind was electric. David was staring at me, his face a mask of confused fury. Elias Black? The Elias Black? Of Black Holdings? What the fuck? Megan? Are you seeing him? I picked up my wine glass again. "Goodbye, David. My lawyer has the paperwork. Don't come here again." The fight seemed to have, finally, utterly drained from him the appearance of a rival, that a powerful, formidable one that was a blow he hadn't anticipated. He looked from me to the door, then back, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Without another word, he shuffled to the door, opened it, and left. The lock clicked shut. I walked to the window, watching the street below. A minute later, I saw David emerge, a small, broken figure, and disappear into the New York crowd. My phone buzzed. A text from Elias. "Elias, nicely handled. The begging is always the ugliest part. See you at 8. We have much to discuss about Phase 3. I looked at the bottle of Margaux, then out at the city, its lights beginning to sparkle in the dusk. The exposé was complete. The public narrative had shifted, and a new player had entered the field. The game was escalating, and for the first time since I'd walked out of the plaza, I felt not just cold clarity, but the first, faint spark of something like anticipation. The Synapse Technologies boardroom was a temple of glass and cold light, designed to intimidate. This morning, it was thick with a silence that was almost a physical presence. The 12 board members sat around the vast, obsidian table, their faces ranging from grim to openly hostile. At the head of the table, David Saturday, or rather, perched at a pail, strung-out imitation of the golden boy from the gala. He'd gotten a haircut and a new suit, but nothing could disguise the tremor in his hands or the hunted look in his eyes. Victor Croft sat to David's left, idly spinning a Montblanc pen, a faint, predatory smile playing on his lips. The other members were a mix of venture capitalists, academics, and the token industry veteran. They all stared at the lone empty seat, the one reserved for the chief strategy officer. My seat. The double doors at the end of the room swung open. I walked in, and the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. I wasn't in morning black. I wore a sharply tailored navy suit, my hair in a low, severe knot. I carried a slim leather folio and an air of absolute, unassailable authority. Andreas followed a step behind me, a silent, suited shadow. David shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "What is the meaning of this? You resigned. You have no standing here." I didn't look at him. I addressed the room. As the holder of an 18% equity stake in Synapse Technologies, held in the Porter Lane Trust, I am invoking my right under Clause 7.3 of the corporate bylaws to attend any board meeting where a vote on executive leadership is on the agenda. My voice was clear, calm, and carried to every corner. And given the emergency nature of this meeting, I assume that is precisely what we're here to discuss. Victor's smile widened. She's correct. The bylaws are clear. Welcome. Megan, please, take your seat. I did. I placed the folio on the table with a soft thud that echoed. David remained standing, fists clenched on the tabletop. This is an ambush. She's here to sabotage this company out of personal spite. Mr. Porter, said Susan Park, the steely-eyed lead independent director. Please sit down. Ms. Lane has the floor. Her tone brooked no argument. The market collapse and the PR nightmare had turned even my former skeptics into potential allies. I opened the folio. I'll be brief. Synapse is hemorrhaging value, talent, and public trust. The cause is singular. Failed leadership at the CEO level. I looked directly at David. I am presenting a motion for the immediate removal of David Porter as Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board. Chaos erupted. Several board members began talking at once. David slammed his palm on the table. You can't do this. I am this company. My vision. My drive. Your vision. I cut in, my voice slicing through the noise, has resulted in a 60% destruction of shareholder value in 5 days. Your drive has been directed into personal entanglements and financial misconduct. I pulled the first set of documents from my folio, handing copies to Andreas, who distributed them. Exhibit A, wire transfer records from the Synapse Innovation Fund subsidiary to Rossi Design Collective, totaling $87.500, authorized by David Porter. The memo line specifies interior design services for a residential property owned by Isabella Rossi, a Synapse employee who reported directly to him. David's face went ashen. That was a strategic retention bonus, disguised for tax purposes. Susan Park peered over her glasses. A retention bonus paid to a design firm for an employee's apartment? Mr. Porter, that is a flagrant misuse of corporate funds. Exhibit B. I continued, unfazed. Email correspondence between David Porter and 3 junior female engineers, documenting repeated, unwanted invitations for private drinks and mentorship sessions at his apartment. When engineer Choi declined, her project was defunded the following week. I looked around the table. This is a pattern of behavior that opens the company up to massive sexual harassment liability. Lies, David shouted, his voice cracking. They're lying. She's poisoned them against me. Then perhaps you can explain Exhibit C, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. I held up a digital audio recorder, a recorded conversation from 2 weeks ago between you and Martin Rhodes of Crane Tech. I pressed play. David's voice, slightly tinny but unmistakable, filled the room. The Q3 roadmap is a decoy, Marty. The real juice is in the predictive module on the legacy servers. Megan's baby. The specs are air-gapped. But for the right partnership, your offer is interesting. Let's talk after the IPO dust settles. Martin Rhodes's voice. You'd share core IP? That's a breach of every NDA you've got. David's laugh. What's a breach between future partners? Megan's too sentimental about that old code. It's time to monetize it. I stopped the recording. The silence this time was absolute. Stunned. This wasn't about sex or money. This was about the soul of the company, selling the crown jewels to a competitor. David looked like he'd been gutted. He stared at the recorder, then at me. His mouth agape. You bugged me? You left your personal iPad unlocked in the home office while you took the call in the garden. I said flatly. The microphone was sensitive. I was looking for a document. I found a treason. She's lying. He screamed, his composure shattering entirely. He pointed a shaking finger at me. This is all a fabrication. A jealous wife's revenge fantasy. She's engineered this whole thing because I kissed another woman. She's unstable, vindictive. He was raving, spittle flying. The board members recoiled, not from his words, but from the unraveling man before them. This was not a CEO defending his record. This was a cornered animal. It was then that the boardroom door opened again. All heads turned. Isabella Rossi stood there. She was dressed not in her usual sleek power dressing, but in a simple, modest black dress. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked young, frightened, and utterly unlike the triumphant woman from the gala. David's eyes lit up with a desperate, manic hope. Isabella, thank God. Tell them this is all a lie. Tell them about Megan's manipulation. Isabella didn't look at him. She walked slowly into the room, her gaze fixed on the board. My name is Isabella Rossi. I was Mr. Porter's executive assistant. I need to make a statement. Isabella. No, David began, but Susan Park silenced him with a sharp gesture. Go ahead, Ms. Rossi. Isabella took a shuddering breath. The relationship Mr. Porter initiated with me was not consensual. It was a condition of my employment. He made it clear that my promotions, my bonuses, my very job depended on my availability. A single tear traced down her cheek. It was a masterful performance. The kiss at the gala, he told me it was just for show, a PR stunt. I felt I had no choice. After Ms. Lane left, he threatened me. He said if I didn't back his version of events, he'd destroy my career. He said he'd claim I seduced him for money. She finally looked at David, her expression a mix of fear and defiance. I won't be silent anymore. The room erupted again, this time in disgust. David stared at Isabella, his face a mask of utter betrayal and horror. You lying whore. You begged for it. You wanted every penny, every promotion. His words sealed his fate. Susan Park stood up. That is enough. Her voice was ice. We have heard more than enough. I call for a vote on the motion to remove David Porter as CEO and chairman. All in favor? One by one. Hands went up. Victor's was first. A lazy, triumphant lift. Others followed, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. Soon, it was unanimous. Even David's hand-picked board members voted against him. David watched, his body seeming to shrink with each raised hand. When the last hand went up, he collapsed back into his chair, a hollow shell. The vote was recorded. He was out. The motion carries. Susan Park announced, David Porter, you are hereby removed. Effective immediately. You will surrender all company property, keys, and access codes. Security will escort you from the building. 2 large security guards appeared at the door. David didn't move. He just stared at the obsidian table, at his own ghostly reflection. I gathered my folio. The meeting was dissolving into procedural details about interim leadership. I had what I came for. I walked out of the boardroom, the taste of victory metallic in my mouth. I made my way to the private executive garage. My driver was waiting. Just as I reached the car, a figure stumbled out of the shadows. David. He must have taken the back stairs. He looked deranged, his tie loose, his hair wild. You, he hissed, blocking my path to the car door. You planned this. All of it. The recording. Isabella, you turned her against me. She turned herself. I said, reaching for the door handle. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was painfully tight. You think you've won? You've destroyed everything. The company. My life. Everything we built. I didn't pull away. I just looked at his hand on my wrist, then slowly up at his face. My expression was one of pure, cold contempt. Let go of me, David. He held on, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Why? Why would you do this? For a kiss? For pride? I finally yanked my wrist free. No, David, not for a kiss. I opened the car door. For every time you took credit for my work. For every time you made me feel like the back office help. For thinking Isabella Rossi was the love of your life while I was paying the bills and building your kingdom. I slid into the leather seat, then looked up at him one last time, his pathetic, furious figure framed in the doorway. You didn't build anything. You just stood in front of what I built and smiled for the camera. I pulled the door shut. Through the tinted window, I saw his mouth open in a silent scream of rage as the car pulled away, leaving him alone in the cold, concrete darkness of the garage he no longer owned. The silence in my new downtown office was broken only by the soft tap of my fingers on a keyboard and the distant wail of a siren. It was 3 a.m. Sleep was a memory. The data on my screen, bathed in the blue glow, told a satisfying story. Synapse's stock chart looked like a cliff. A new window popped up, a live feed from a financial news network. There he was, David, not in a studio, but in what looked like a poorly lit bar. His phone propped up, streaming live. The Chiron below his puffy, unshaven face screamed. Disgraced ex-CEO David Porter speaks out. I turned up the volume. A calculated, cold-blooded takedown. David slurred, gesturing wildly with a glass of amber liquid. Ice cubes clinked. She planned it all. From the beginning. The marriage. The shares, it was a long con. Megan Lane is a sociopath. The chat on the side of the stream scrolled too fast to read, but the emojis were clear. Crying, laughing faces. Popcorn. Thumbs down. A moderator pinned a comment. Dude, take the L and get a lawyer. I took a sip of cold coffee, watching dispassionately. This was the final stage of grief. Public bargaining. Fueled by bourbon and self-pity. My personal cell buzzed. Elias, watching the meltdown. It's performance art. Tragic, but compelling. Reminds me of my second divorce. A small, hard smile touched my lips. I typed back, me. It's not art. It's a cautionary tale. Are we on for tomorrow? Elias, the wires are set. Phoenix Ventures launches at 9 a.m. The vultures are already circling the Synapse carcass. We'll have our pick of the bones. I looked back at the stream. David was now crying, actual tears cutting through the sheen of sweat on his face. She took everything. My company, my reputation. She turned everyone against me. Even Isabella. She poisoned her mind. That was a new angle. The victim narrative, now with a side of conspiracy. Pathetic. I closed the feed. I'd seen enough. The next morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, I stood on a simple stage in a WeWork-style event space we'd rented for the day. The room was packed, not with Synapse's old guard VCs, but with a different crowd, younger fund managers, tech journalists hungry for a new story, and, most importantly, a cluster of women I'd quietly headhunted from Synapse's middle ranks, the brilliant engineers and product leads David had consistently overlooked. I wore a simple white shirt and tailored trousers. No armor today, just clarity. Thank you for coming. I began, my voice calm and clear without a microphone. The room hushed. My name is Megan Lane. Until recently, I was the Chief Strategy Officer at Synapse Technologies. A ripple went through the crowd. I helped build that company from a dorm room idea to a NASDAQ listing. And last week, I walked away from it. I paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. I walked away not because the dream failed, but because the leadership did. I walked away because I realized a hard truth. A company's culture is set from the top. And when that culture tolerates hypocrisy, rewards betrayal, and silences the very people who do the work, that company is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. I could see heads nodding, especially among the women from Synapse. So, I continued, a steely edge entering my voice. We're not here to mourn a corpse. We're here to build something new, something better. Today, I'm announcing the launch of Phoenix Ventures. Our mission is simple, to find, fund, and fiercely support the builders the world overlooks. The founders who don't fit the boy genius mold. The engineers with groundbreaking ideas but poor networking skills. The women, the people of color, the outsiders who are told their vision is too niche or not scalable enough by people in rooms that look and think the same. I gestured to the team behind me. Our first fund is fully capitalized. Our first investment. I looked directly at a woman in the front row, Lena Cho, Synapse's former lead AI architect, whom David had passed over for promotion 3 times, is in Athena Technologies, led by Lena Cho. Lena's work on predictive neural networks was the true secret sauce at Synapse. Now, it will be the foundation of her own company. The room erupted in applause. Lena, a woman of few words, simply stood and gave a firm, determined nod, her eyes bright. I waited for the noise to subside. Phoenix isn't just about money. It's about building companies with integrity from the ground up, with transparency, with respect, where credit is given where it's due, where your personal life isn't a weapon used against you, and your professional value isn't contingent on your personal alliances. I let my gaze sweep the room. Don't let anyone steal your fire, especially not the people you once trusted to keep it burning. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped off the stage, I was immediately surrounded. Handshakes, business cards, eager pitches. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Elias, leaning against the back wall. He gave me a slow, approving nod. My phone vibrated incessantly in my pocket. Later, in the car, I scrolled through the alerts. News outlets were picking up the Phoenix launch, juxtaposing it with images of David's drunken live stream. The headline said it all. From ashes to empire, ousted Synapse founder launches Phoenix. As disgraced ex-CEO crashes and burns, there was one voicemail from David's lawyer. I played it on speaker. Ms. Lane, this is Robert Thorne, again, representing David Porter. My client is prepared to accept the terms of the asset freeze and the divorce settlement, with one condition. You publicly retract your statements about his misconduct and acknowledge his contributions to Synapse. We feel this is a reasonable request to allow him to rebuild his life and reputation. Failure to do so will leave us no choice but to pursue a defamation suit. The call was from a burner phone. It proves nothing. Please call me to discuss. I deleted the message. A defamation suit. A last, desperate bluff. The recording was from his personal iPad, backed up to his iCloud, which was a marital asset. It proved everything. I dialed Andreas. David's lawyer is threatening defamation, using the burner phone line. He's folding. Make the next move. Already on it. Andreas's voice was crisp. The subpoena for his iCloud data and all corporate financials is being served to him and the new Synapse interim CEO as we speak. The SEC inquiry is now a formal investigation. He's not rebuilding his life anytime soon. Good, I said, watching the city blur past. What about the Isabella situation? Andreas chuckled. Ah, yes. It seems Ms. Rossi has decided to pivot. She's shopping a book proposal. Title is something like Synapse Seduction. My Year in the Gilded Cage. Her agent is claiming she has explosive details about David's toxic manipulation and the real story behind the IPO kiss. I closed my eyes. Of course, the predator was now repackaging herself as the ultimate prey. David's love of his life was now writing his epitaph for a 6-figure advance. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Send her a bottle of champagne, I said dryly, from a secret admirer. That evening, finally alone in the loft, the adrenaline faded. The quiet felt heavy. I poured a glass of wine and stood at the window. The city glittered. Indifferent. I had won. David was finished. Synapse was a hollow shell. Phoenix was born. So why did I feel this hollow ache in the center of my chest? My phone rang. Not the business line. My private line. The one with only a handful of contacts. I looked at the screen. Mom. I took a breath and answered. Hi, Mom. Megan, darling, I saw the news. The new venture. I'm so proud of you. Her voice, warm and steady as always, was a balm. Thanks, Mom. A pause. Are you all right? Really? I opened my mouth to give the usual professional, polished answer, the one I gave to investors, to journalists, to myself. Instead, a choked sob escaped. I clamped a hand over my mouth, tears spilling over. I cried silently, shoulders shaking, the phone pressed to my ear. My mother didn't speak. She just waited on the other end of the line, a continent away, her quiet presence a lifeline. When I could finally breathe, I whispered, "It hurts. I know. Agape Mao," she said, using the Greek term of endearment from my father. "Of course it hurts. You gave him your heart, and he used it for target practice." I was so stupid. I gasped. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You were in love. He was stupid and weak and cruel. There is a world of difference." She took a deep breath. "You remember your Yaya, your father's mother?" Vaguely. I sniffed. "When she found out her husband, that your grandfather, that was beating her sons. She waited until he passed out drunk one night. She took his wallet, the money he'd hidden in a coffee tin, and her 3 boys. She walked out with nothing but a single suitcase and the clothes on their backs. She worked 3 jobs. She never looked back. She used to tell me, they can break your things, they can break your bones, but if you let them, they will try to break your fire. Don't you ever let anyone put out your fire. Eleni." I wiped my face, the words seeping into the cracks of my soul. "You, my brilliant girl," my mother continued, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just save your fire. You used it to burn down the prison he built around you. And now you're using the ashes to build a fortress for others. That is your power. That is your inheritance. Not from him. From her." I nodded. Though she couldn't see me, the hollow ache was still there, but it was filling with something else. Something solid and hot. Resolve. Purpose. "Thanks, Mom," I said, my voice stronger. "Come visit soon. Bring that nice Elias man. I'll make pasticcio." After I hung up, I placed the wine glass, untouched, on the table. I walked to the fireplace, a decorative gas one. I hadn't used it. From a drawer, I retrieved the one personal item I'd taken from the penthouse, a single photo in a silver frame. Our wedding day, a small, secret ceremony on a beach in Santorini. We were both laughing, wind in our hair, looking at the camera with what I had believed was forever. I looked at the face of the man I had loved. Then, without ceremony, I opened the glass frame, pulled the photo out, and held it to the automatic fireplace starter. The flame caught the edge, curling the paper, turning our smiling faces to blackened ash. I held it until the heat neared my fingers, then dropped the last fragment into the hearth. It glowed for a moment, a tiny, dying ember, and then went dark. The chapter on David Porter was closed. The book of Megan Lane was just beginning. The Manhattan Family Courthouse was a monument to faded linoleum and quiet despair. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale regret. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my back rod straight, watching the clock tick towards 9 a.m. Andreas shuffled a final stack of papers beside me. Across the aisle, at the defendant's table, David sat with his new lawyer. Robert thorned at a man with the polished aggression of a used car salesman. David wouldn't look at me. He stared at his hands, which were clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He'd traded his Tom Ford for an off-the-rack suit that didn't quite fit. The unraveling was now sartorial. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Warren." The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense gray bob. She surveyed the room, her gaze lingering on David with a dispassionate curiosity, like a biologist examining a dissected frog. "We're here on Lane versus Porter," she stated, her voice dry. "Petition for dissolution of marriage with cause. I've reviewed the preliminary motions. Ms. Lane, You allege infidelity and financial dissipation. The stakes, given the marital estate, are considerable. Mr. Thorne, your client contests? Thorne stood, oozing false confidence. He does, Your Honor. Ms. Lane's claims are a fantasy spun from jealousy and vindictiveness. The so-called evidence is manufactured or taken out of context. My client is the victim of a ruthless, premeditated smear campaign designed to impoverish him and seize control of a company he built. Judge Warren's eyebrow arched slightly. A premeditated smear campaign that began with him kissing another woman on national television? That's an interesting strategy. Counsel, proceed. Ms. Lane's counsel. Andrea stood, calm and steady. Thank you, Your Honor. We will demonstrate a pattern of deception, betrayal, and theft. We call our first witness, Martin Rhodes, former CEO of Crane Tech. David's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. Martin Rhodes, looking uncomfortable in a witness chair, was sworn in. Andreas led him through a series of questions about exploratory partnership talks with David post-IPO. And in these talks, Andreas asked, holding up a transcript, "Did Mr. Porter offer you access to Synapse's proprietary predictive algorithm, codenamed Athena's Core?" Rhodes shifted. He hinted at it, said the official roadmap was a decoy, that the real value was in the legacy code. He said we could work something out for the specs. And did you find it odd that a CEO would offer a competitor his company's crown jewels? Objection. Calls for speculation. Thorne barked. Sustained. Rephrase. Counsel. Did you proceed with the partnership? Andreas asked. No. Rhodes said. It seemed reckless. And then the news about his removal broke. Thank you. No further questions. Thorne's cross-examination was a blustering attempt to paint it as typical industry chatter. But the damage was done. The judge's lips were a thin line. Next, Andreas called a forensic accountant. Dry, meticulous testimony traced the $87,500 from the Synapse subsidiary to Isabella's design firm. Then, the promotion documents for Isabella Rossi, fast-tracked over more qualified candidates, all signed by David. Through it all, David grew paler, smaller in his chair. His objections, whispered to Thorne, grew more frantic. Then, Andrea said, Your Honor, we would like to play a recorded conversation entered into evidence as Exhibit 12. The judge nodded. The audio from David's iPad filled the courtroom, that his voice, conspiring with Rhodes, calling the algorithm Megan's baby, and dismissing my work as sentimental. When it finished, the silence was profound. David was visibly shaking. Your witness, Mr. Thorne, Judge Warren said. Thorne stood, approaching the stand as if the recording didn't exist. Ms. Lane, he began, his tone implying he'd stepped in something unpleasant. This recording, you obtained it by accessing your husband's personal device without his knowledge. Is that correct? It was a marital asset. I said, my voice clear, and I was looking for a household document. I found evidence of corporate treason instead. You were snooping. Thorne accused. In a fit of jealous rage after the gala, I was conducting due diligence. I countered calmly. On an asset that my company that my husband was attempting to loot. Thorne's face reddened. He changed tack. Let's talk about the marriage. You insisted on secrecy. A hidden marriage. A hidden financial agreement. Doesn't that suggest a relationship built on calculation, not love? A business arrangement? And in a business arrangement, when the terms no longer suit one party, they engineer an exit. Isn't that what this is? I looked directly at the judge, not at Thorne. I loved my husband, Your Honor. The secrecy was his idea. To protect the lone genius brand he felt was vital to Synapse's success. I agreed to diminish my own role, my own public credit, to support his dream. The calculation was his. The betrayal was his. I am simply using the tools of business he taught me to protect what is legally and rightfully mine. Thorne scoffed. Legally and rightfully? You're seeking 70% of a marital estate built on his work. His name. Andreas stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Move on. Counselor. The judge said, her eyes on me. Thoughtful. Thorne, sensing he was losing, went for the jugular. You're a cold woman, aren't you? Ms. Lane? This entire spectacle, the public resignation, the TV interview, this trial, it's all a meticulously planned revenge. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching him squirm? The courtroom held its breath. I let the question hang in the air for a 3 count. Then I spoke, my voice dropping, not with coldness, but with a weary, devastating honesty. Enjoy it, I repeated softly. I finally looked at David. He was staring at me, a hollowed-out shell. No, Mr. Thorne, I don't enjoy it. I look at the man I married, and I feel sick. I feel betrayed. I feel foolish. I gave him my trust, my work, my silence, and he treated it all as a line of credit he never had to repay. I turned back to the judge, my composure cracking just enough to show the genuine pain beneath. This isn't revenge, Your Honor. This is accountability, and it is the loneliest, most heartbreaking thing I have ever had to do. Even Judge Warren's stern expression softened a fraction. Thorne, knowing he'd been outmaneuvered, had no further questions. The final witness was David himself. Under Thorne's gentle prompting, he told a story of pressure, of misunderstanding, of a wife who was emotionally distant and obsessed with work. He claimed the money to Isabella was a loan, the kiss a mistake, the conversation with Rhodes taken out of context. Then Andreas stood for cross-examination. He didn't yell. He was quiet, precise, and surgical. Mr. Porter, you stated the $87,500 was a loan to Ms. Rossi. Do you have a signed promissory note? It was informal, between friends. A subordinate is a friend you give nearly $90,000 to, without documentation. While you are her CEO, did you report this loan to the board? To HR? David swallowed. No. The promotion documents for Ms. Rossi. You overruled the hiring committee's recommendation. Why? She showed initiative. More initiative than Lena Cho, the lead architect with 2 PhDs who you passed over? Andreas placed the personnel files side by side on the evidence projector. The disparity was glaring. David had no answer. A sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. The recording, Mr. Porter, you are heard calling the algorithm Megan's baby and saying she was too sentimental about it. Were you lying to Mr. Rhodes? Or are you lying to this court now about the value of your wife's contribution? David's control shattered. I'm not lying. It was her code. Fine. But it was my company. She would have never done any of it without me. I'm the idea guy. I'm the face. She's just the mechanic. It was the same. Desperate refrain from my office. Andreas didn't smile. He let the words hang in the air, then picked up the final document. Just the mechanic, who provided the initial $2 million seed capital from the Lane Family Trust. David deflated. She did. Who structured the Series B financing? She did. Who is on the patent for the Athena's core algorithm? Filed before your marriage? A long, tortured pause. She is. Andreas put the paper down. No further questions. The gavel fell an hour later. The judge's ruling was swift, thorough, and merciless. The prenuptial agreement, with its ironclad infidelity clause, was upheld, given the egregious nature of the dissipation and the deceptive conduct. She awarded me 75% of the marital estate, not 70. The Tribeca penthouse, the Hamptons house, the majority of the investment portfolio, and my 18% stake in Synapse was affirmed as my separate property. Free and clear, David was ordered to pay my legal fees and a substantial sum in spousal support for 5 years. He was left with his heavily mortgaged car, his decimated Synapse shares, now practically worthless, and a mountain of legal debt. Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. David didn't move. He sat at the table, staring blankly at the wood grain. Thorne was already packing up, barely glancing at his client. I stood, gathering my things. As I turned to leave, David finally spoke, his voice a broken whisper only I could hear. "You've left me with nothing." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "No, David," I said softly, over my shoulder. "You had everything. A partner who loved you and built an empire for you. You left yourself with nothing." I walked out of the courtroom, Andreas a step behind me. The flash of cameras in the hallway was a blinding wall of light. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. Later that night, in the loft, the silence returned. The hollow ache was back, a physical pain in my center. The fight was over. I had won, utterly. I walked to the bookshelf, to a small, unmarked box. Inside was the last physical remnant. Our wedding certificate, a simple, beautiful document from a beach in Santorini. I hadn't been able to burn it with the photo. I took it out, my fingers tracing the embossed letters. Then, methodically, I tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths. I walked to the kitchen, turned on the gas burner, and held the pieces over the blue flame. They caught, curling into black ash, floating up towards the vent hood. I watched until the last fragment was gone, consumed by a clean, hot fire. The legal knife had fallen. The ties were cut, all of them. There was nothing left to burn. The air in the warehouse-turned event space in Soho crackled with a different energy than the Synapse IPO gala. There was no clinking champagne or arrogant backslapping. Instead, a focused hum of conversation buzzed under the industrial chic lighting. The crowd was leaner, sharper tech reporters, angel investors with discerning eyes, and a notable number of women in leadership roles. A banner on the minimalist stage read simply, "Athena Tech." I stood in the wings, listening to Lena Cho, my hand-picked CEO, wrap up her technical demonstration. Her voice, once hesitant in Synapse's boardrooms, was now clear and commanding as she explained the neural network's applications. And because our model is built on a foundation of interpretable AI, it avoids the black box problem that plagues our competitors. You can trust the results because you can see the logic. Lena concluded, to genuine, enthusiastic applause. She wasn't a showman like David, she was a builder, and the crowd respected it. Andreas materialized at my elbow, holding a tablet. The bankruptcy court approved the sale of Synapse's remaining assets an hour ago, he murmured, a hint of triumph in his voice. Our shell corporation, Minerva Holdings, was the only qualified bidder. We got the core patents, the server architecture, and the non-compete agreements for the engineering team we wanted for pennies on the dollar. A cold, clean satisfaction settled in my chest. And David, formally served with the SEC's indictment this morning, securities fraud, based on his attempt to sell the IP. Wire fraud for the misappropriated funds to Rossi. It's a federal case now. His lawyer is begging for a plea deal. I nodded, watching Lena take questions from the audience. A young woman asked about Athena's ethical data sourcing. Lena answered with precision and passion. I thought, this is what it was supposed to be. My moment came. I walked onto the stage as Lena finished. The spotlight felt different now, not an interrogation lamp, but a tool. Thank you, Lena, for that brilliant overview of our future. I began, the emphasis subtle but clear. A few knowing laughs rippled through the crowd. They'd all read the headlines. A year ago, the core technology behind Athena Tech was the hidden engine of a company called Synapse. It was undervalued, underappreciated, and in the hands of leadership that saw it as a bargaining chip. I paused, letting the silence speak. We don't see technology as a chip. We see it as a cornerstone. And we don't see people as liabilities, but as the only true asset. That's why Athena's first initiative, beyond our commercial products, is the Phoenix Incubator, a dedicated fund and mentorship program for founders from underrepresented backgrounds in tech. Because the next world-changing idea shouldn't die in a dorm room or be stolen in a boardroom, simply because its creator doesn't look like the old idea of a founder. The applause was louder this time, sustained. It wasn't the raucous cheer of a stock market win. It was the solid approval of a bet placed on the right thing. Later, at the buzzing reception, I felt a hand at the small of my back. Elias. He handed me a glass of sparkling water. No champagne. I asked, "You're working, and you've never needed it to shine," he said, his gaze scanning the room appreciatively. "This is impressive, Megan. Real, not smoke and mirrors." "Smoke and mirrors burn out," I said, taking a sip. "I'm done with fires I didn't start." Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A raised, familiar voice, slurred and angry. "I need to see her. She has to see me." My security lead, a stoic former Marine named Ray, was a wall of muscle blocking David's path. David looked worse than I could have imagined. His clothes were rumpled, his hair greasy. He'd lost weight. The federal indictment hung over him like a shroud. "Let him through." "Ray," I said, my voice calm. The crowd nearby fell silent, sensing drama. Ray stepped aside, keeping a close distance. David stumbled forward, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. He smelled of cheap whiskey and despair. The glittering, successful crowd parted for him, not out of respect, but morbid fascination. "You," he hissed, stopping a few feet from me. Elias subtly shifted his stance. "A silent guardian. You did this. You bought my company's corpse. You're parading around in its skin. Athena Tech is built on the viable parts." I corrected him, my voice low so only our immediate circle could hear. "The parts you tried to sell off or let rot. We're giving it a new life, one with a spine. A new life with my money." He spat, a fleck of spittle landing on his chin. "The houses, the accounts, you left me with nothing. And now this charade. It's not your money, David," I said, a cold patience in my tone. "It was our money, money I earned, invested, and protected while you were playing CEO and cheating on me with an employee whose book advance is now your only cultural legacy." The mention of Isabella's tell-all book, Gilded Cage, which had hit bestseller lists by portraying David as a manipulative predator, made him flinch. "You turned everyone against me," he whispered, the anger draining into self-pity. "The board, the investors, Isabella. You even turned my own technology against me." I took a step closer, ignoring the gasps from a few onlookers. "No one turned against you, David. They just finally turned to face you. And what they saw wasn't worth following." I looked him up and down, not with hatred, but with a profound, final pity. "You built a persona, not a company, and personas are fragile things." He lunged then, not at me, but towards a nearby table where a journalist was recording on her phone. "She's a liar, a sociopath. She ruined me for a kiss. A single mistake." Ray was on him in an instant, grabbing his arm in a firm, immobilizing grip. David struggled weakly, his cries becoming incoherent sobs. I looked at the journalist. "Please delete that. He's unwell." She nodded, quickly stopping the recording. This wasn't a spectacle I needed. I turned back to David, now held firmly by Ray. "Your lawyer should be focusing on your plea deal, not on harassing me. The sentencing is next month. I suggest you find some remorse before then. Judges appreciate it." The mention of sentencing broke the last of him. "You'd send me to prison? After everything?" "I didn't send you anywhere, David," I said, my voice flat. "You walked yourself there, step by step, with every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal." I signaled to Ray, "Please escort him out." and call for a car service. He shouldn't be driving. As Ray led a weeping, broken David away, the crowd slowly resumed its chatter. The incident absorbed into the night's narrative. Elias touched my elbow. You okay? I watched David disappear through the doors, a shell of the man I'd married, the man I'd built a world for. There was no joy in this, only a deep, resonant finality. I'm fine, I said, and for the first time, I almost meant it. He's a ghost. And this, I gestured to the vibrant room, to Lena talking animatedly with a group of young female coders. This is real. Weeks later, the final piece clicked into place. I sat in my new, sun-drenched office at Athena HQ, a sprawling loft in Chelsea. Andreas was with me, along with a crisp, official document. It's done, he said, sliding the paper across my desk. David accepted the plea deal. 1 count of wire fraud, 1 count of making false statements to the SEC. He'll serve 18 to 24 months at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Fines, restitution, the works. He's broke, and he'll be a felon. I looked at the document, at the stark legalese that described the end of David Porter. I felt nothing. No triumph, no sorrow. It was just a fact, like the weather. Good, I said simply. I signed a different document in front of me, the final funding release for the Phoenix Incubator's first cohort. 10 startups, all led by women. Make sure the restitution is processed. I want every cent he misappropriated paid back, with interest, to the Synapse Employee Wellness Fund. Andreas nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Poetic. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. You won. You got everything you wanted. I hope you're happy in your empty castle. I didn't recognize the number, but the self-pitying tone was unmistakable. David. From a jailhouse phone, maybe. Or a friend's. I didn't bother to block it. I just deleted it. I walked to the window, looking out at the Hudson River, sparkling in the afternoon sun. My city, my rules, my kingdom, built not on someone else's back, but from the ashes of what I'd had to burn down. The door opened, and Lena peeked in, holding a prototype of a new data interface. Got a sec? The team has a breakthrough on the compression algorithm, and we think it could. I turned from the window, a real smile touching my lips. I always have a sec. Lena, show me. The past was a closed book, its author sentenced. The future was a blank page, and we were just starting to write. The Hamptons wind carried the sharp, clean scent of salt and pine. My beach house. Bought with the first returns from Phoenix Ventures, it was a modest, shingled cottage compared to the marble monstrosity David and I had owned. This one had wide windows that looked onto the dunes, and the constant, soothing roar of the Atlantic. It was filled with light, with books I'd actually read, and with a silence that was peaceful, not accusing. I stood at the granite island in the open kitchen, slicing limes for cocktails. The party wasn't large. Lena was here, debating quantum computing with a venture capitalist from MIT. Victor Croft held court by the fireplace, telling a war story that made a group of young founders laugh. The energy was relaxed, earned, a celebration of survival, not just success. My phone, face down on the counter, buzzed once, a calendar alert. I flipped it over. 1 year since Phoenix launch. A year. It felt like a decade. It felt like a blink. Penny for your thoughts. A warm voice said beside me, Elias. He leaned against the counter, looking more at ease in a soft cashmere sweater than I'd ever seen him in a boardroom. He'd been a constant these past months, a partner in strategy, a steady presence, and slowly, carefully, something more, just thinking about time. I said, passing him a slice of lime, how it stretches and contracts, based on the quality of the company. He finished, a knowing glint in his eye. He nodded towards the living room. This is good company. Before I could answer, My mother emerged from the hallway, her arms laden with a massive ceramic dish, the aroma of baked pasta, cheese, and cinnamon that her legendary pasticcio that filled the air. Megan, stop working and tell these people to eat. The food is getting cold, she commanded, her Greek accent thick with affection. I'm not working, Mom. I'm hosting. Same thing. Elias, be useful. Take this. She shoved the heavy dish into his hands, and he took it with a chuckle, playing the dutiful surrogate son. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at me, her dark eyes soft. You did good. Koremo. This is a good life. She kissed my cheek and bustled back to the dining room, already scolding Victor for not having a plate. I felt a familiar lump in my throat. This approval, this simple, domestic normality, felt like a harder-won victory than any boardroom coup. Later, as the sunset painted the sky in streaks of violet and gold, the party drifted onto the wide deck. I found a moment alone at the railing, watching the waves. The sounds of laughter and music from the house were a warm blanket at my back. Elias joined me, handing me a fresh glass of wine. They're starting a debate about Ethereum versus Solana in there. I made a tactical retreat. I smiled, taking the glass. Wise man. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last sliver of sun disappear into the sea. The past year unspooled in my mind. The scorched earth of the divorce, the meticulous, exhausting build of Athena and Phoenix, the quiet nights where the ghost of betrayal would whisper in the dark, the slower, brighter mornings where the ghost's voice grew fainter. He wrote to me, I said quietly, the words carried away on the wind. I hadn't planned to say it. Elias didn't look at me, just sipped his wine, giving me space. From prison, a letter, forwarded by my lawyer, said it was his one permitted phone call, and he used it to write instead. I'd found the plain white envelope in my office pile a week ago. It had sat there, a silent, inert bomb, until this morning. Did you read it? I opened it. I said, saw the handwriting. That messy, arrogant scrawl he never bothered to fix. I took a deep breath of the salty air. It started with my dearest Megan. I got that far. Then I folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and fed it to the shredder under my desk. I didn't need to hear his version of remorse. I lived his version of love. That was enough. Elias finally turned, his expression unreadable in the twilight. No curiosity, no lingering need for closure. I met his gaze. The closure was the judge's gavel. The closure is Lena's product launch next week. The closure is my mother in my kitchen, yelling at a billionaire to eat his salad. I shook my head, a faint, sad smile on my lips. His words are just more noise. I've spent a year building a life of quiet. I'm not letting his noise in. He reached out then, not to take my hand, but to gently brush a strand of wind-blown hair from my face. The gesture was so tender, so devoid of agenda, that it made my breath catch. Quiet doesn't suit you, Megan Lane, he murmured. But peace? Peace looks good on you. I leaned into his touch for a second, then looked back at the darkening ocean. For so long, I thought freedom was the goal, the finish line. Get free of him, free of the lies, free of the marriage. And then you cross it, and you're just standing there, alone. And you realize freedom isn't a destination. I turned to him, the words forming as I spoke them. A truth I'd only just grasped myself. It's the starting block, the empty page. It's terrifying, and it's the most gift anyone can ever give themselves. He didn't say anything. He just listened, his presence a solid anchor in the face of my revelation. That's what the foundation is, really. I continued, thinking of the Megan Lane Foundation for Economic Equity, the paperwork for which was finalized last week. Its sole mission, to provide legal funds and transitional housing for women leaving abusive partners. It's not about revenge. It's about handing other women the key to their own starting block. Because I had resources. I had a war chest. Most of them just have a suitcase and a fear that's been living in their house for years. From inside, my mother's laughter rang out, clear and joyful. Lena was demonstrating some app on her phone to a captivated group. Victor was pretending to be annoyed, but he was smiling. You're not alone, Megan, Elias said, his voice low. He didn't gesture to the house full of people. He meant himself. I know, I said, and for the first time, I truly, deeply felt it. It wasn't a dependence. It was a choice, and that makes the freedom sweeter, not cheaper. I took one last look at the horizon, where the indigo sky met the Black Sea. Somewhere out there was a past, a ghost, a pile of ashes. Here, behind me, was light, warmth, and the low hum of a future being built. Conversation by conversation, line of code by line of code. I turned my back on the ocean and faced the glowing windows of the house. I took Elias's hand at a conscious, deliberate act of connection. Come on, I said, my voice firm and clear, carrying the ghost of the strategist, but warmed by a new, resilient heart. Let's go back in. I think my mother is about to force someone to dance, and I don't want to miss it. We walked inside, hand in hand, leaving the vast, dark freedom of the night at our backs, and stepping into the warm, crowded, beautifully uncertain future.